Before we begin the review, it's important to note here that while you could use the core rulebook to create your aeldari party, a supplement called Inheritance of Embers has since been released that gives an overhaul and more options into generating aeldari characters, their archetypes and equipment. It also supplies a bit more background into their culture, their lore, and what their position and purpose is in the Gilead system. The book also provides some useful framework bonuses for aeldari parties as well. Because of this, I would recommend picking this up to help both the GM and the players with this aeldari based adventure. Now, on to the review. Standing at a meagre 17 pages, or 20 if you include the front cover and the adverts at the end, Shards of Ul-Khari is a PDF-only Wrath and Glory adventure set in the game's own Gilead system, and is the first standalone adventure by Cubicle 7 solely focused on the aeldari and their struggle for survival. Although the adventure appears short, it's surprisingly packed full of content. While this technically is the first standalone, there was an aeldari adventure in the first iteration of Wrath and Glory, found in the 4-adventure collection book Dark Tides, called Twisted Strands. Shards of the Ul-Khari is designed as a Tier 2 and 3 adventure for a party of corsairs that involves political intrigue, exploration, and survival horror. The story revolves around recovering a lost shard of the Avatar of Kaine, the aeldari god of war, from the wreckage of the craft world Ul-Khari, which crashed on the ice world of Trolleyus. Interesting to note as well is that there is wiggle room to adapt the adventure to agents of other factions, and also the option to reduce the difficulty for that of Tier 1 characters. The adventure explores the desperation of the aeldari, their cultural decline, and the constant struggle between survival and extinction. The setting is a mix of bleak grandeur, forgotten history, and the ever-present threat of the Tyranids, who embody the ultimate doom facing the aeldari race. Major spoilers ahead, you have been warned. The adventure begins with the players serving Baron Orad Fionn, a corsair leader known as the Phantom. He tasks them with retrieving a powerful fragment of the Avatar of Kaine, which could be a symbol of the aeldari resurgence or a devastating weapon. To complete this mission, the players must navigate 3 different settings. The political intrigue of the Baron's court, dealing with rival factions such as Drukhari raiders, corsairs and Asuryani remnants. The ruins of Ul-Khari, a shattered craft world mixed with dangers from rogue aeldari constructs to human scavengers. And the dying jungle, a thriving but deadly biome within the wreckage, home to monstrous beasts and a lurking Tyranid horror. At the climax of the adventure, the players must face a Tyranid lictor, a cunning and deadly predator that has been using the shard as bait to lure in its prey. The final choice involves deciding who should claim the shard, delivering it to Vion for power, returning it to the Asuryani for preservation, or even sacrificing it to summon an Avatar of Kaine in a desperate bid for survival. There are 4 key elements that make this adventure so successful. The first is political manoeuvring. The Baron's court is rife with intrigue, and the players must navigate shifting alliances to stay in favour. Players can choose who to align with, affecting how much support they receive during the mission. Failing to navigate court politics properly may result in additional enemies pursuing them during their quest. They may attempt to double-cross some factions, but doing so risks severe repercussions later. The second is exploration and horror. The icy wreckage of Ul-Khari is filled with deadly creatures, environmental hazards, and tragic remnants of aeldari civilization. Once the players leave the Baron's court, they embark on a treacherous journey across the ruins of Ul-Khari, which has crashed into the ice world of Trolleyus. The wreckage is filled with both environmental hazards and lurking threats. The third is combat and survival. Encounters with Drukhari, Tyranids and rival corsairs make every step of the mission perilous. After braving the ruins, the players enter the Temple of Kurnus, a lush but deadly forest biome within the wreckage of Ul-Khari. This area contains the Shard of the Avatar, but is also home to numerous dangers. And the fourth are moral choices. The fate of the Shard and its implications for the aeldari rests in the player's hands. These implications can vary from wealth, power and influence, to being branded as traitors, or gaining an enemy in those who sought the player's help to begin with. Apart from the new adventure, the book offers several new elements to gameplay, including environmental hazards, characters, and a new enemy. There are numerous new aeldari characters and factions, namely the two rival corsair factions, the corsairs of Baron Aradviron and the Silver Lions of Kaine. Then there's the warlock Tresak, an Asuryani representative of Ul-Khari, and finally Skaraveth, a Drukhari witch leader from the Cult of the Dark Eyes. Though not directly present, the Greensteel Corsairs also loom over the adventure as a political force, of which Baron Aradviron seeks to break away from. Then there is the encounter system. This is a very expansive D66 encounter table that can add flavour and depth to the adventure, and appears to be very well designed, balancing structured combat, environmental challenges, and free-form narrative encounters to create a dynamic and immersive experience. Things from an inspirational flock of falchion birds, all the way up to a brood of gene stealers. Let's talk about the final battle, a Tyranid Lictor. The Lictor is one Tyranid threat that we have not seen yet in the core rulebook, Threat Assessment Xenos, or Purge the Swarm, so it's a welcome addition to the Tyranid arsenal of threats. It's meant to be tough and a little unforgiving. Hopefully with the correct adjustments you can make sure that your players really feel the weight of this encounter. Players have multiple possible outcomes for this final encounter. They could defeat it. They could flee with the shard, turning the encounter into a horror chase, or alternatively they could sacrifice a player to summon the Avatar of Kaine to destroy it, consuming the shard in the process. Shards of Ul-Khari is an exceptional adventure that fully embraces the depth, tragedy and internal conflicts of the aeldari. It masterfully blends political intrigue, exploration, survival horror and intense combat, making it a compelling story-driven experience for both new and veteran players. The adventure captures the essence of the aeldari, a race on the brink of extinction, constantly torn between their past glories, present struggles and uncertain future. Whether the players navigate court politics, brave the ruins of their shattered home, or fight a desperate battle against a Tyranid horror, they are constantly reminded of the aeldari's dwindling place in the galaxy. Let's look at some strengths. Deep aeldari lore and themes. This book is one of the best explorations so far of aeldari culture in a TTRPG setting. It tries to encapsulate the different aeldari factions' perspectives, Corsairs, Craftworld Aeldari and the Drukhari, all with their own goals and motivations. Themes of cultural decline, betrayal, survival and sacrifice are woven into the story, making for an immersive aeldari experience. Strong narrative structure and political intrigue. The Baron's Court segment is a blend of diplomacy, manipulation and factional tension. Players must navigate fragile alliances, uncover rivalries and decide who to trust, which adds depth to the role-playing experience. Every faction feels distinct and their interactions impact the latter parts of the adventure. Excellent use of exploration and horror elements. The wreckage of Ul-Khari and the dying jungle are detailed, eerie and filled with danger. Encounters with rogue Wraithguard, Tyranid creatures and ghostly remnants of the past create a haunting atmosphere. The Lictor as the final antagonist makes for a high-stakes climax. Meaningful player choices and consequences. Every major decision has a significant repercussion, particularly regarding who gets the shard of the Avatar. Players must balance their own survival with larger political ramifications. Choosing who to betray and who to aid can shape the future aeldari conflicts. The option to sacrifice a player character to summon the Avatar of Kaine can make a tragic and cinematic finale, embodying the aeldari's desperate fight for survival. Flexible adventure design. The adventure is designed for tier 2 or 3 characters, and can be played as a standalone one-shot, an introduction to aeldari campaign, or inserted into an existing campaign. It also includes alternative suggestions for running it with non-aeldari or lower tier characters, making it more accessible. But what about some weaknesses? Requires strong GM involvement. The political and intrigue-heavy first act requires a GM who can roleplay multiple factions effectively. Players who prefer direct action over diplomacy may struggle with the negotiation-heavy start. Some encounters can be brutal. The Lictor encounter is particularly deadly. Without smart tactics, a party wipe is possible. If the players anger too many factions, they could be overwhelmed by enemies before even reaching the shard. Not ideal for non-aeldari players. While there are alternative options for non-aeldari characters, this adventure is clearly designed for an aeldari-focused party. Imperial or Chaos-aligned characters might feel out of place in the story's themes. Ultimately though, Shards of Ul-Khari is an immersive and lore-rich Wrath and Glory adventure. It perfectly captures the tragedy and complexity of the aeldari, weaving together core intrigue, haunting exploration, survival horror, and a climactic battle against an overwhelming foe. Despite requiring a strong GM and a party that enjoys role-playing, it delivers an unforgettable Warhammer 40k experience, one filled with desperate choices, bitter rivalries, and the ever-present shadow of extinction. If you want a gripping, thematic, and high-stakes aeldari adventure, Shards of Ul-Khari is an absolute must-play.